It's a pervasive idea in the Pikmin community that Pikmin 4, although easily the biggest and most fleshed out game in the series, feels incomplete in a way. Perhaps it's just due to overblown expectations given the 10-year wait, but Pikmin 4 feels like it needs a small extra something to go from being just another solid entry in the Pikmin lineup to the absolute apex of the series. The game achieves so much already, but it's not without its problems. Now, with the rumors of possible DLC out and about, many see this as the best hope for improvements to the game to be made. We've already received a tiny free update adding a progress bar into the game's loading screen, so maybe we could see some more significant changes. My name is Vantage Emblem, and today I'm talking about your DLC ideas from Pikmin 4, sourced directly from the comment section of my last video. Here, we're going to be discussing what your ideas, if they were implemented, would do for Pikmin 4 and for the series as a whole. I'd also like to talk about the overall likelihood of these ideas, and some of the challenges and benefits to adding them. Oh, but before we do any of this, if you're new around here and want to see more Pikmin content on the internet, subscribe. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. New or returning areas. So, to kick this off, I'd like to start out by expanding on an idea for DLC that I covered in my last video on the subject, the addition of a new area to the game, further fleshing out the campaign. I detailed my thoughts on this idea a bit more in that video, which you can catch on the information card in the top right, but there's still a lot more merit to this conversation. We could possibly see one or more new areas that expand out the main campaign. These areas probably would add more Dandori challenges, Dandori battles, and caves, since that's the content consistent with the areas that already exist in the main story. Though Pikmin 3's DLC consisted of only some extra mission mode stages, they were new models and new areas, and I think Pikmin 4 could do the same thing, but with its new Dandori challenges and Dandori battles taking place inside of a new main area. If a new area were to be added, it would make Pikmin 4 overwhelmingly the longest and most content-filled Pikmin game, even if no new enemies were added. There's well over 100 enemies in this game, and it would be totally okay to see some of them revisited in a tougher environment. However, I'm not holding my breath for a new area, especially because new content could just be thrown into a new cave that pops up at the rescue command post, like with the Leaf Stage trials, as some commenters have pointed out. Still, if I were in the driver's seat with this, I'd focus on giving extra content for underutilized Pikmin types by making the area use all of the hazards. On top of that, I'd make the area mostly underground too, similar to the Forest Navel or Formidable Oak, and I'd make it so glow Pikmin could actually be deployed on the surface, maybe expended from glow seeds or even found from luminals. And this isn't just because I like edgy underground spaces in the Pikmin games, we've already got caves for that. The reason I want this area to have an underground setting is because it would be focused on having something for every Pikmin type to do. The underground setting would let the player's glow Pikmin act as a jack-of-all-trades, so the 3 Pikmin type limit wouldn't be that annoying, and I'd argue that the glow Pikmin could act as a 4th type even with the 3 type limit, since they're deployed in a different way from the Pikmin that live in the onions. Alternatively, this area could see the implementation of the unfinished, unused glow Pikmin onion, but I think that's probably unlikely considering how powerful it would be. Unless if it's a reward for the completion of this area, but then again, you'd really have nothing to do with it afterwards, right? At the same time, you could also finally limit glow Pikmin. Since they can be out during the day during this area, they could be damaged by patches of sunlight that come through, which are perhaps nearly instantly lethal to glow Pikmin. Of course, that's just what I would do. It could be a completely different style of area with completely different mechanics and setup, and I'm really okay with that. Another idea along these lines is to remix existing areas from prior games and implement them. Pikmin 2 did this with Pikmin 1, and there was a lot of speculation that Pikmin 4's base game was going to do this anyway with Pikmin 3 areas. I see this as unlikely, since all of those games already exist on Switch and were recently re-released, but it's still something fun to consider. Maybe we could even see the unearthed area finally make it into a mainline game with Ochi's swimming abilities replacing the lily pads. Yeah, I know that's not going to happen, but I can dream though. Old characters return in a new side story. A popular extension of the idea for a new area is a new side story featuring returning characters. I've seen thoughts that it should be a playable Louie story, or maybe something with the president of Hokotate or the Kopaiets, all taking place in new or remixed areas. It could feature a new goal for the series. For example, as Cabbage426 suggests, filling out the Piclopedia/cookbook, or a return of old mechanics like juice from Pikmin 3. Regardless of the specifics it takes, I think this is a realistic format for something interesting to be made, and it could be executed similar to other side story DLC found in games like Fire Emblem in a way where it doesn't interfere too much with the main campaign, where it just sits rather unobtrusively, similar to the way Olimar's Shipwreck Tale is handled. Plus, it would bring in our old favorite characters that didn't make the cut, and seeing them in Pikmin 4 would be truly delightful. I'd love to play with the president of Hocotate Freight, I'd love to play with the Copiates, I'd love to see the Hocotate ship again. Return of missing old Pikmin types. Speaking of missing characters, there's also the matter of missing Pikmin types. Pikmin 4 lacks Bulbmin and Puffmin, and I know a lot of you want them back and in HD. I do as well, though I think it's rather unlikely since the Glow Pikmin have the same suite of abilities that the Bulbmin have, and the Puffstool exists, though without the Puffmin. As much as I'd really like to see it, I just think this is unlikely overall. Unless if a small campaign is made with a focus on exclusively using Bulbmin in some caves, I think this is probably not going to happen, unfortunately. A new Pikmin type. Unlike the return of old missing Pikmin types, however, the addition of a new type of Pikmin we've never seen in the series is entirely possible. Just like the Glow and Ice Pikmin, it could expand out the Pikmin family, and it probably would sport the same glossy design language that the two new types from 4 already have. The most popular request for this type is an orange Pikmin, which I think is a fair call. As for what it would do, I've got no idea. Maybe it would be similar to some of the unused concept art types we've seen over the years, able to climb things, or maybe small in stature, or maybe it would be something entirely new. Unfortunately, I don't think this is terribly likely, since it would be strange to lock a type into the DLC, especially if they were added to the main story, as they'd probably be pretty useless in the main game. But it's still very possible to see a new type, especially if a new area were added, and our new Pikmin type could totally make any new areas feel refreshing, though I suppose they would probably see pretty limited use. Still, there's a non-zero chance we get a new type, and maybe they could even make it into Bloom. Seriously though, where are Glow and Ice Pikmin in Bloom? Adding missing enemies. I know some folks really wanted to see some of the missing enemies from the other Pikmin games added. While the one comment here I saw was about the volatile Dweevil, which is an enemy I see is pretty unlikely to return considering its role was taken by both an item and other Dweevils with bomb rocks, I would still love to see them back, and I think other enemies could make the cut too. Between Gatling Groinks, careening Dirigibugs, Scornets, and the entirety of the Hey Pikmin enemy roster, there's a lot of cool ideas that could make their way into Pikmin 4. Still, I see this as rather unlikely unless we get a new area. Maybe one new enemy might make it in, perhaps a remix of an old boss from Pikmin 2 or 3, but overall, I see the implementation of these enemies as pretty unlikely given how huge the roster already is. Level Editor. Our next idea is one that's been a very popular request from the community since well before Pikmin 4 was even announced. That idea is a level editor, one that would let the player make either their own caves, or Dandori challenges, or whatever. As Cameo221 says, this would let us play the game forever, since everything else is finite content. I think this is, unfortunately, pretty unlikely, even though it's a staple in the longevity of other RTS games. Personally, I'd love to see a way to make and share Dandori battle and challenge stages, but that's just me. It could be a game changer for competitive play with Pikmin 4, but again, it's very unlikely. Randomly generated roguelike cave. Along the same lines, I'd like to talk about the idea for a roguelike mode with randomly generated caves. I'd imagine, were this to be added, it would be put in the rescue command post, and it would take a whole day to go through, with the goal being to go as far as you can go with the squad of Pikmin you've taken. It's kind of similar to the Pikmin 2 mods, Endless Abyss or Colossal Caverns, and it could be an excellent way to generate limitless content for players that just want to explore and fight, especially since a lot of Pikmin 2's cave units were made into the caves of Pikmin 4. While I think it's more likely than a level editor, it's still a rather unlikely overall idea, despite being one of my favorite ideas for the game I've seen. Difficulty options. Pikmin 3 Deluxe added Ultra Spicy mode alongside an easier normal mode to the campaign, and the community has never been the same since. Though not everyone is happy with the way Ultra Spicy mode was added, I think difficulty modes could be a great tool to improve the challenge of Pikmin 4 as it stands, while also making it more accessible for newer players. If a tough-as-nails game like Metroid Dread could receive a free update with difficulty options, one of them making the game significantly easier, and the other one ridiculously harder, this game probably could do the same. Pikmin 4 difficulty modes could easily reshape and rebalance the game in a way that delights and entertains new players and veterans alike. An easier difficulty could potentially reduce material cost and unlock onions earlier, allowing players to play with more types more safely earlier. Alternatively, a harder difficulty could cause some tougher enemies to respawn and up the stats of enemies overall, making the player have to manage their resources more carefully. It could also add in mechanics like a fruit system or a day limit to the main campaign, making things significantly tougher as the player would have to go fast and manage what caves they go into when. It could also make hazards more dangerous, with fire scorching Pikmin more quickly and electricity being lethal upon contact. New Game Plus, quality of life changes, campaign structure tweaks, and accessibility. This is easily my favorite idea for Pikmin 4 DLC, and I'd say it might actually objectively be the best as well. Although it's a bit of a conglomerate between a few ideas put together, I think it gets at the heart of exactly what Pikmin 4 is missing and addresses it, directly resolving the concerns that Pikmin fans have had with the games without changing anything about the core gameplay of Pikmin 4. To quote Commodore Marstedt, who I believe put it very well, "The very endgame unlocks are too late to be of much use for many players, especially those who save Olimar's shipwreck tale for later, or who 100%ed areas as they went, both things I did. I would love to have been able to use Ochi's final ability unlock, Louie's final reward, or the 2 unlocks from the Trial of the Sage Leaf at least a little bit before the game was over. As is, I've pretty much only used the Ochi and Louie unlocks in Dondori challenges, and the Sage Leaf unlock for 1 treasure in the final area. It would totally make no story sense to have those abilities from the start, but a New Game Plus mode which gives you access to all the unlocks from your previous playthrough would still be a fun way to experience the game. Maybe this could or should be paired with a harder difficulty mode too, or just a remix of the areas a little like Olimar's Tale did." Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, but I agree with every word. New Game Plus is exactly what this game needs, isn't it? It could easily fix the problems within the game. The lack of enemy respawns, how convoluted unlocking swarming is, the lack of reason to revisit areas and attempt their challenges with different Pikmin types. So many of these things could be fixed here. Alongside adding accessibility options, for example, addressing the lack of a complete cursor control option, the lack of online play, the inability to tweak the volume of the game's music, or the forced lock-on, I think a New Game Plus alone would make for perfect DLC, and it would be exactly what the game needs. It would be relatively easy to implement and would take into account fan feedback without disrupting the main campaign. That said, I doubt this would be the route they take, since, unfortunately, Nintendo can be pretty stubborn with their core game decisions. Still, I feel like this could transform Pikmin 4 into the best possible package. Heck, as some of you pointed out, New Game Plus could even be our difficulty option, making the game harder to match with our added firepower, especially if we get to start the game with all of the onions unlocked, depending on what we did in the last campaign. So, what do you think? Do you think that any of these ideas would make for great DLC? Do you think it would be free or paid DLC? How likely do you think it is that we're going to get DLC for the game at all? Please, let me know in the comments below. That said, I'll stop rambling and end things here. My name is Vantage Emblem, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care, and goodbye. Cheers.